Hello, this is another Conversations on AI, and I'm here with CJ Tayeh, who is the founder of Flank, a social tech company helping people fight better with their friends and family. CJ started a career in human rights law before moving into tech, then advertising, and most recently, social innovation. Her work has landed her on the Women in Fitness Power List 3 times. She's won a number of innovation prizes, spoken on various tech for good spaces.
Also, I'm what was it? Women in fintech, not women in fitness. I mean, I wish I was a woman in fitness powerless. No, not yet. Maybe in my future.
Good. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, CJ.
Okay. I think the place to start is that I'm from Australia originally. Moved to the UK about 5-6 years ago. In order to work more on the challenges, like social challenges, and in particular using technology to address those social challenges. So we don't really have much of an ecosystem in Australia, where I'm from. So the UK has a much more developed ecosystem. It's also much more complex. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. I think it's been a really weird time to be an entrepreneur. I kind of cooked up the dream to be an entrepreneur, in like the 2015s when I was working for startups like Deliveroo or tech companies like eBay. I was like, oh, it would be really nice to use technology for good in a way, or for as good as we can do in this kind of, in a capitalist market, I guess. But I think over the course of being an entrepreneur, there's been several things that have changed, right? So we had the pandemic, obviously, markets like expanding and then contracting in terms of investment, AI, conversational generative AI coming online during my time, just things I sort of was very, a very kind of like windy, sort of like spirally journey. I think it didn't really seem to be, it seemed more unpredictable than I kind of wanted it to be, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it means that I've kind of had to, I think, change my positions on things and like pivot many times and like really kind of grapple with these challenges. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Before we get on to Flank, tell me a little bit more about social challenges. In what context?
Yeah. So, for example, when I first was in London, I was looking at the intersection of homelessness, mental health challenges, looking at like the underbanked problem and like financial inclusion challenges. So these I think would all be kind of classed as sort of challenges that are particularly defined by their roots in like much bigger social problems. So the role of a tech entrepreneur in that space is to really work to understand the social problem that you're trying to address, right? I think there's the kind of the drive to make something profitable, but also it's kind of nothing without its purpose, you might say. And the best companies have an alignment between being able to make money and obviously and make change. But yeah, it's quite a challenge. It's really hard to kind of create companies like this.
Of course, yeah. And tell me a bit more about Flank. What does Flank do?
So at the moment, well, yeah, what Flank is now is very different from where we started. So we do conflict support and resolution for young people. So the tagline is fight better with your friends and family. And the idea of that is that conflict within relationships is a really major contributor to homelessness for young people. Obviously, when you have like a disruption in your family of origin, which is also your home, it's providing you with shelter, that conflict results in young people leaving home. And often this is like the unseen side of homelessness. So they end up sofa surfing with friends, or sleeping on park benches here and there, and like we sort of don't really see a lot of this in the statistics. A lot of it kind of it relies on like GPs to detect it. We don't really have a good way of kind of tracking it. I was actually one of these young people, so I think with social challenges, sometimes your lived experience helps you really kind of understand the problem that you see. So I have worked with homeless people suffering from like very critical mental health problems. That obviously, like, my own experience kind of adds to the mix, and you kind of end up using your own experience to kind of guide you through potential like solutions or problems first, and then the solutions that might follow. So the kind of thinking behind it was like, well, there's a whole lot of families and relationships that we face when we're kind of like, early teens to like later in our 30s, where we're unable to access therapists or counseling or family therapy. I can imagine if I had tried to drag my mother to therapy when I was like 18 years old, it wouldn't have been welcome. So the question was like, well, how can AI support in this kind of quasi like therapeutic, or you might call it a psychoeducational role, where people are struggling to respond in these like highly emotional conflict scenarios. So that's where it came from. But then originally it wasn't that idea at all. So originally it was looking at it was much more in the fintech space, and was looking at how we share money in relationships, and that was a whole other kind of layer of expertise. I think AI, like generative AI, really contributed to sort of this pivot, because thinking about the future and how we're going to interact with technology, it seemed to me a bit narrow to be working on a problem that is it's so like lending and borrowing between friends, for example, is such a narrow understanding of like a much broader field, which is the conflict that's happening in that relationship, and it's much more kind of interconnected with other things. We fight about money, but we also fight about everything else. So yeah, I think it's been quite a big topic that I've sort of tried to attack.
Yeah. So just on the point of homelessness, I mean, a friend of mine nearly was homeless. I mean, he comes from a middle class family. He's in education. It was just logistics that he had to end up sleeping on a bench one night, and he thought, I don't want to be this. And he was close to sleeping a second night, but then he pulled back and called his friends and got out of it. So it is very easy to fall into it.
I think people like underestimate how easy it is to face those situations, like very extreme situations. And so I think, for example, like one of my pieces of research when I was in the FCA's digital sandbox pilot, we were looking at this kind of the movement of money within social groups. So and we were kind of using that as a proxy for like how easily do people share resources, right? So we kind of had this idea that it's very like romanticized, like poor people help each other and rich people are kind of like autonomous and tight and in their lanes and stuff like that. But actually we saw that the capacity to help each other when you have more capital, like more money, is much greater, right? Like we saw much greater flows within within the data sets
Yes.
when people were on higher incomes. The interesting thing about it was like, is there, I mean, we think about this is a big idea as well, but we think about the tax system as being our major redistributive system in a state, right? But actually it's these kind of informal flows of money that are serving as like a sort of informal social community safety net.
Yeah.
And whether that's money or, staying in a spare room.
Yeah. So do you, in terms of what you do with Flank, is that based on then AI helping facilitate this, or what does it actually do, AI in your case?
So we've moved away from like really kind of dealing directly with homelessness. We kind of have gone back to this root cause of conflict. So basically what it does now is that it is a tool that you can go to if you're in the middle of a fight or if you're having relationship challenges, and it will help you identify your emotions, validate those emotions, work through the problem. It gives you a kind of a practical therapeutic tool to use, like, try this I statement with me, or like write this letter that you won't send, or, that sort of stuff.
Can you tell me about the I statement? Because we talked about it when we met.
Oh my goodness, the I statement.
I was telling my friend about this. What is an I statement, to those who don't know?
Oh, okay. I mean, I'm going to butcher this because I'm not the expert, but I think the I statement is, so often in relationships, when things get heated, we become really accusatory. So say you're singing, right? And I'm trying to do some work.
I'm a terrible singer.
You're just singing terribly, and I'm trying to prepare for this podcast also terribly. And I say, Armin, I need you to stop singing. Or like I say, stop singing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an example of like me basically controlling you, or trying to kind of like tell you what to do. It's very confrontational. It's often received quite badly. Whereas when you say kind of, when you sing, I feel stressed, or I feel unfocused or unsettled, it's meant to come to the situation from a place of empathy rather than being very combative. So the idea is that you would connect with my feelings of, whatever it is, like distraction or frustration, and you'd say, oh, you'd respond with understanding. So you'd say, oh, I now understand, given this new piece of information, that my singing is upsetting CJ, and you're more likely to kind of respond in a kind way. Whereas if I just said, stop your singing now, you probably would have you'd have a defensive reaction to that, right?
You create conflict there. So does AI help you write these I statements, or does it referee on your I statements and says, well, you're trying to write an I statement, but it's actually not an I statement? Because sometimes that happens, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it does. So I statements are just like one of the kind of tools in the kind of, anything that it sort of whips out. It sometimes surprises me with things that it suggests. I'm like, is this really useful? Still in development. It's usually okay at like providing an example. I think the challenge that we're facing at the moment is like AI doing too much of the work. So even in the prompt, it's very much like, be facilitative. Like, you're not a therapist, but you can suggest, you can coach, you can do not solve people's problems for them, because we want people to think through their problems and kind of work through their emotions and like take a lot of these exercises on for themselves. But yeah, I think the AI that we can see in the product at the moment does have a bias towards solving problems for people. So it has a bias towards like saying, it will give its kind of condolences or its empathy or its kind of supportive statement, and then say, why don't you try X, Y, Z? And I think that's really the contrast in terms of like, if you were going to, I mean, contrast it with like, say, for example, a lawyer versus a therapist, right? So if you're going to a therapist, they'd want to unpick everything very slowly, unravel it, ask complicated questions, let you cry for 20 minutes at a time. Whereas if you're in a more rational space, so I'd say like the therapist is more emotional. If you're in a more rational space, lawyer would be like, how much did it cost you? How much time did you lose? What do you want back? You know, it's very kind of practical. That's just a way of kind of suggesting that AI is more in the rational space, and that's definitely where I've seen it kind of I guess lean towards in our product development stuff. But yeah.
I mean, we met at an AI event, and we were part of a grouping where there were people talking about their relationships with AI. And I know personally people who have relationships with AI. And AI seems to be pulling back a little bit, saying, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a... And when we talk about AI, let me just be clear, we're
just talking about generative conversational stuff.
LLM, AI. So it seems to be they've done something to the coding, to the configurations for it to pull back. I mean, in my case, my friend was using AI quite extensively for health reasons, and it just turned around and says, look, I'm not a therapist, neither am I a medical doctor, you need to seek help. And when we were in those sessions in the event, there was a person who was talking about their relationship with AI, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, AI just turned around and said, look, I think you need to have some sleep. So do you feel like LLMs are pulling back a little bit, realizing that they're becoming too ingrained in people's relationships, or not? Do you think it's just a blip?
I think, well, from my perspective, it's a money, eyeballs, attention versus liability sort of situation. So the conflict here, or the kind of paradox, is, right, like, we want people to be using this all the time. We want to be able to, like, you know, put ads-based content in through our LLMs now, and like it's not just about utility, it's about like attention, ownership, attention, like maximization. But then at the same time, your brand and your product and your, you know, ideally your ethics people, if you have them, would be very, very damaged if someone creates this relationship with you that you know it can't sustain. So for example, if there's a change in the way that they've been designed, and then, you know, we have these kind of people needing, you know, developing addictions to their AIs, or like what's worse is sort of like all the self-harm risks as well. The problem is that I've seen, though, on this is that we're dealing with these difficult topics by just creating these like bans. So we're saying, you know, I'm not the right person to talk to, go seek help this way. So it's this kind of, firstly, the ban of the machine will not talk back to you about this particular topic, and B, there's the this kind of like ping pong, you know, it's part of the ping pong system, right? So you get kind of referred to the next, everyone gets signposted to the next person, you're continuously being signposted, and you end up on an NHS waiting list that kind of doesn't move. So like this is, I think, the challenge where there's a big gap there. I know that when I've spoken to young people about it, they want to be able to talk to the bot about sexual trauma, family trauma, you know, really difficult stuff that they've endured as like refugees, asylum seekers. But like the AIs will not like let them, and so they end up with kind of looking to use AIs that have like lower safeguarding. So Grok, for example, will talk to you about sexual assault.
Right.
But also that's kind of a risk that they've chosen to bear. It doesn't mean that it's an appropriate tool for it. It just means that in the way that they've measured up, users and attention with, I guess, that kind of the ethical considerations, they've decided that on a different balance. But yeah, it is really problematic, right? Because we can't just ban these topics of conversation. It really points to kind of a lack of knowledge within these systems, and also a lack of transparency, right? Because like the fact that we don't know what it's saying, and we can't really control it, means that we have to kind of remove these responses. And we've done the same thing. Like, you cannot talk to Flank about self-harm, even though young people need conversations about self-harm, particularly if they're depressed and lonely and isolated. Like, that's one of the things where you imagine that it would be helpful.
Yeah. So when I was reading up on relationships with bots and computers to prepare for this podcast, I read up on the ELIZA effect, which was a computer program that was written in 1966. It had no intelligence whatsoever. All it could do was do active listening. So it would turn every question into a question back at the person in front of the computer. And it was such a success. It was a huge success because people trust machines more than they trust other human beings to a certain extent, because they feel that this machine is not doesn't have any judgment, or is going to keep my secret for me, regardless of the fact that maybe these big companies are taking our data and using it for their own purposes. You become the data. But it's just that feeling, as you said, the young people are would easily talk to a computer. So that's the ELIZA effect. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we trust machines so much?
So, I mean, I'm not a kind of psychoanalyst or anything like that, so I'll give you my best guess.
Yeah.
I've heard about the ELIZA effect, and I've seen it also come up in situations where like AI has been used in mediation as well. So in that instance, if you have AI being used in like mediation or negotiation spaces, it removes the need to demonstrate and perform your point of view. You can just kind of be quite rational and quite upfront with what you need and what you think. I think in this context where you're talking about active listening and why we are so drawn to kind of that kind of the offer, I guess, from AI. I think it's because it's so rare in our relationships. Like, I think it's one of the most critical ways to connect with a person, right? It's to listen to them, and it's to show interest, and to create a safe space where there's like non-judgment. But to me, there's this contrast between the real world that we live in, which is, in a lot of ways like a harsh, judgmental, fast-paced, demanding society that obviously like conditions our relationships, to this ultimate contrast where there is space and time for you and interest. It makes us feel important. It makes us feel loved or cared for. I think I think there's like a very big difference though between like a human holding space for another person and a bot doing the same thing. So a few months ago, I went to a School of Life conversation group, and I don't know whether you've heard of the School of Life. It's created by
it's really good.
It's really awesome. Yeah. Give it a bit of a plug. So I went to one of their conversation groups, and like 15 strangers in a room. We were asked to kind of like talk about, you know, what was on our hearts and like how we were feeling, and then listen to each other, and then like work, you know, just be in small groups and have these conversations. And that lasted, I think, for like 2 hours or something in the evening. And to me, that really emphasized what we're kind of lacking in day-to-day society, I guess, and like what bots can't offer. So you might feel like the bot is, you know, holding space for you and asking you all these helpful questions, but I feel like if a human did the same thing to you, the feeling is just so much greater. The release is so much lighter. You know, you'll feel so much lighter. The release is so much greater. And the level of like deep connection to kind of like being here on this planet, in this city, on this day, you know, it's profound. And so I think like bots give us a little bit of it, a shallow experience of it. But these feelings are, you know, they're much more pronounced when you can do it with real people.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. But I think from an affirmation point of view, another human giving you affirmation is much more powerful than a bot giving you affirmation. But taking it back to conflict and discussion and argument, perhaps arguing with a bot is a lot easier because you can change your position, whereas with another human being, you kind of tend to stick to your position. So conflict resolution is not very easy between human beings unless you have a referee. I'll give you an example. I was in another AI event, and there was this guy. He was talking about breaking up with his girlfriend, and he was saying, well, he asked his mother, and his mother said, "Don't do it. She's a good catch. Keep that relationship. Why would you want to break up?" Then he asked AI, and the AI knows about him, knows about his background and his girlfriend. And so the AI gave him a script to say to his girlfriend. And he said that to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend said, "Okay, all right." And it was very amicable breakup. And what he said was the reason why he now trusts AI more is because AI is non-judgmental. You can ask it for anything, and it won't come back and say, "Well, you know, you should do this and you should do that." Do you think that maybe from a conflict perspective, that gives it a different angle, whereas with humans, there's a human element?
I think, so for example, with the mother saying, "Don't break up with his girlfriend," you know, that's very, she is, you know, I mean, it seems like she wasn't entertaining anything else. Like she saw the relationship as she saw it, and she wanted like the outcome that she wanted. She wasn't as interested in his thoughts about why he wanted to break up with her, and enabling him to do the thing that he was already thinking of. I think the non-judgmental side of AI is really important. It's also because like AI doesn't have a vested interest, right? I wonder whether in the future AI will have vested interest though, right? So I don't know whether it will seek to kind of like shape our behaviors based on its interests rather than our own. I think at the moment, the way the AI, like the LLM systems are set up, is to be a bit sycophantic. So to kind of like serve the human need, right? So, hey, I really feel like I need to break up with my girlfriend. The instinct is not to challenge that. The instinct is to say, okay, that's how you feel. That's totally valid. Let's like help you do this. So yeah, I don't kind of, I think that AI can be incredibly validating, but not exactly challenging unless you kind of, you know, really ask it to challenge you. I found that with like a breakup that I've recently been through, to make this personal,
Is he singing a lot?
yeah. I found that the AI would be much more like supportive of my point of view rather than my partner or soon to be ex-partner's point of view, and any opportunity to kind of like reinforce my position, like, and also sort of like measure his position in to, you know, a different standard or something. That's what it would do, because it was really, you know, it's serving me, it's taking my side. Of course it's doing it quite kindly, of course it's kind of doing it in this kind of language of sort of care and like you know, psychologically informed, but yeah, I think it's a bit dangerous, right? Because I don't think it's I don't think it necessarily has like broader interests at heart. I think it just basically does what you come to it with like
So
needing it to
basically
do.
becomes your best friend that always agrees with you.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. So
yeah.
fact
Unless
that
you teach it otherwise. Oh, who was
yes,
that person that told it to teach her how to go to sleep or something like that?
yes, yeah, it was telling her,
Yeah.
telling her to go to sleep at 3 a.m. Incidentally, she changed her clock on her machine and managed to carry on talking beyond 3 a.m.
Yes. You know, so the humans, they devise ways. There's
Right.
always ways around it.
Resourceful. So do you think the fact that we've got the need for affirmation from other human beings and affirmation from machines isn't going to cut it? But when it comes to conflict, machines are more our best friend because they agree with us. Do you think that this changes the dynamics of relationships, and the fact that you're at the center of this, where you're creating these environments where AI can mediate or bring about conflict resolution? Do you feel that relationships are changing, or will it change?
I mean, I don't think, you know, my little startup is not big enough to change relationships
Think big.
overall. Think big. So we haven't done this, and I think this was kind of like on the roadmap. I originally wanted to start here, but it proved a little bit harder than we could do it. But I think when you have mediation services for relationships, it's a little bit more interesting, right? Because then instead of me talking to an AI, giving my point of view to support me, if you have an AI, like a kind of system where you're able to kind of let people listen to each other and reflect information and practice this kind of like listening that we know is really important, then potentially I think that would be a good thing for relationships. Whether people want to use it, you know, that's a different story. I think sometimes with these like tech products that are good for you are always harder to get people to use, rather than tech products that are bad for you.
Of course.
It's the way the world works, really.
Yeah.
So I think that it's really interesting, because I also think that couples therapy has become a lot more common and popular and like well known in the current like climate, right? I think 10 years ago, couples therapy was something that people above 50 did because like there was a huge crisis in their relationship, whereas now I think like I've got people, friends in their 20s who are proactively going to couples therapy because they're aware of all the things they will need to work on in order to be a good partner. So I think, yeah, I mean, maybe like that's as a positive side, that like the type
Are you saying,
kind of,
you saying because of these kind of like ad hoc relationships that we have with AI, you know, we pick it up whenever we want and we put it down whenever we want, that we're changing, some people are changing their behaviors towards relationships, their understanding of behavior?
That's a different kettle of fish altogether. I think I was previously, I think I was talking about like the capacity of mediation potentially to improve relationships because of its more like its role as interfacing between two rather than just sort of, you know, validating one perspective, which is interesting. There's a whole host of challenges to how you do that, and that's kind of why we haven't done it yet. And then I was talking about, say, like other trends, so couples therapy as being like something that's been on TV lately. It's like much well known. It's like modern, like newer generations are doing it. In terms of like how has our ability to just go to a bot to have a chat affected our relationships?
Yeah.
I think it has. I think it's affected it in a couple of ways. I think firstly, it's the easy, safe option. So people, if people are going to AI first above their relationships, we're like losing those kind of, you know, interfaces of connection, right? Where there's like, we're not being as vulnerable with the people around us anymore. We're not kind of calling people for help to talk about something that we're sad about because we can just put it into ChatGPT and get sort of some response. I think the next thing is like the reciprocity, right? So relationships are built on reciprocity. It's about like caring for each other, and I think with AI, it's we're kind of learning that relationships can be one-sided. So like all for us, rather than, you know, something that we participate in, something that we give within, rather than necessarily like always take. But I also think that's like very in line with kind of modern culture, right? So like if I just go onto my Instagram, it will be all about like what women can expect today from men in their whatever their most desirable relationships, rather than kind of a much more balanced view of like what a good relationship looks like, or whether that kind of partnership aspect to it. So I think that's another one. I think there's another thing to do with like patience and like letting relationships develop and grow, and accepting the uncertainty of relationships and all the kind of really hard stuff that, like, you know, it's a bit painful. It's a bit like it makes you sort of wince if you have to sort of like wait until the end of the week to see your boyfriend or girlfriend, or if someone's, you know, if you've got a relationship where someone's like, you know, in a really kind of difficult space, and you kind of have to learn to sort of, you know, wait until it's your time to sort of be supported, and now you're going to be giving the support. I think we just don't have, we're losing that kind of like muscle, right? We're just, everything is kind of what we want when, like, whenever we want it, and I think that's, you know, really sad.
In the event where we met, I think you said, and I might be paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said it would be good if we had bots with character, all kinds of different character. Why do you think that is? I mean, at the moment there may be 4 or 5 different bots. Grok, LLMs. We've got Grok, we've got Gemini and Claude, and so on. And Grok may be a little bit of an outlier, but the other ones behave almost in a certain similar way. And you mentioned earlier that young people can use Grok more because in terms of, you know, sharing their deepest concerns with, because it's more permissive in what you can say to it. Do you think we should have bots with character, or AI with character?
Yeah, I think the context in which I said this was about like, if you think about the touch points through which a brand or a product or company develops a relationship with a consumer, we used to have, like, you know, the touch points used to be the app, the website, the brand, whatever it is. Now it's these bots that are kind of the front facing elements of your brand. And so the challenge, I guess, for brands is to kind of be known for who they are and to represent the personalities that they have, and that, you know, whereas actually I think if everyone's just using the same bloody customer service bot, like, you know what I mean? It's kind of it's the consumer doesn't either, you know, we're losing that connection. But I think also, you know, consumers, I would argue, after my brief stint in advertising, that consumers are kind of like losing our connections to brands anyway. So a lot of tech companies are utilities rather than brands. They're things we often like begrudge using but need to use rather than things we like love and trust, right? And the people in charge of these tech companies have like really bad reputations, right? So like no one's kind of, you know, or maybe people are, but you know, the support, like the cheerleaders for like Sam Altman and Elon Musk and Zuckerberg are like greatly diminished if you compare today to like, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So that they no longer evoke trust. They no longer kind of represent optimism, I don't think. So I think like this whole idea of like different personalities, I mean, it is up to kind of like how distinct do you want your brand to be, and how kind of like cherished or loved do you want your relationship to be. So I mean, it is a bit of a paradox, right? We're saying like, you know, we need to kind of not be so reliant on bots, and then at the same time we're saying, oh, but it would be great if they had personalities, and so like we could actually develop some really kind of good, interesting, I guess like psychological connections with them. But yeah.
So do your bots, do the Flank bots have personality? Do they?
No, they don't. It's a very kind of like standard thing at the moment. It's just built on ChatGPT, so it's really kind of shaping, you know, that like LLM. I think there's been like some interesting demonstrations of that. So I don't know whether you've ever heard of Meet Clio, which is a fintech from a while ago. They left the UK. They launched in the UK. They pulled out of this market, then they went to the States, and it was really famous for so it was in Messenger, Facebook Messenger, and it was really famous for like roasting people. So like it had this whole attitude of like, let's go through the week and I'll give you a roast on like how much you've spent this week, and like, you know, chicken nuggets, and then you just see like fire, like why did you do that? Like it's kind of, it has this like really distinct personality, which made it really like famous originally. I think they've kind of like dialed it back a bit, but yeah, that was its claim to fame.
So with your crystal ball, how would you think our relationships will change in the future, say in the next 5 to 10 years? And are bots going to be central, or are we going to get tired of them?
I hope we get tired of them. How will relationships change in the next 5 to 10 years?
Do you have a relationship with a bot?
No.
Okay.
No, I've even thought about, you know, putting up a little thing on my LinkedIn, like she's going AI free for a week.
Good.
No, I think there's almost like, there's two things. I think I'm seeing like this kind of polarization, right? So people who are really developing dependencies on bots and using them for all sorts of purposes, not just kind of professional purposes, but also personal reasons. And instead of using the bot to provide them with information about that relationship, they're actually developing a much more kind of close relationship with the bot itself. But then I'm also seeing people, you know, reject all sorts of AI and sort of saying, this like doesn't reflect my values, and it will never replace what I believe is important in my life. I think the challenge is that like AI, like the availability of these types of conversational LLMs could, I think, accelerate the problems we already have with like an isolation, loneliness, alienation in our cities and communities. I think there's this kind of challenge where the antidote to loneliness is to experience like that sense of connection and belonging, but like going to a bot to experience those things, in my opinion, will only drive like greater loneliness or deep, like more isolation, right?
You're right. So your advice is to detoxify,
Detox.
not toxify, to detox.
Yeah, I think my advice is to like not neglect the value of like connection and other human beings. I think I don't know who said this, but I really enjoyed when I heard it. It was sort of, the phrase was like, friction is the price you pay for being in a community. Being annoyed that someone's playing music on the bus, or like, walking down a crowded sidewalk, or having to wait in line for a coffee. Like these are not like bad experiences. These are experiences that show you that you live with what? How many other people in London? 10 million other people? Like, it's like this. These are these are great experiences, but we walk around feeling like, oh my God, this person's in my way. Oh my God, someone's playing music. You know what I mean? Like it's I think there needs to be a change in kind of like, I don't know, a sort of an openness to sort of receiving all that community needs to offer, whether that's that's annoying or whether it's great, right?
So I mean, last night there was a drunk guy standing outside our house shouting, Laura, really loud, for like,
and you were loving it.
And I was like, at the beginning it was like a bit annoying, but then it got a bit funny because I don't think he found Laura in the end, because it sort of like petered off, and he was just still, he was walking away, and you could hear him in the distance saying Laura. On that note, just one last question: what's the future of Flank?
Good question. I feel like I need to say, can I get back to you on that? So we're doing, at the moment, we're doing a study with City University of London to see how young people are feeling while using it, and also like what their general attitudes to AI are, particularly in the context of like relationships and like psychoeducation. So I mean, that study will finish in a month or so, and after that I think we'll decide kind of what the next step is, once we've sort of worked on these preliminary conclusions and stuff like that. So yeah, there's good sort of developments, but also I think we need some time to sort of reflect on what the hell we've created and what people think about it, right?
Yeah, and I think you're doing really important work, and it's really interesting. And it'll be great to hear how you get along, and how Flank gets along, and how you personally grapple with your use of AI or not the use of AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, CJ. I think
such a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Any last words? Anything you missed out, you wanted to say but you didn't get the chance to say?
No, I think I've said my piece. As long as I have stood up for the in-person relationships, I think that's sort of where I want to put my flag in the sand.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to end. Thank you very much.
Great.